What's going on, everyone? Are you still looking for that perfect one-stop shop for all things pop culture? You know, that one place where you can hear hot takes about superheroes, Star Wars, video games, and more? Well, fear not. Bridging the Geekdoms is the place for you. A podcast that focuses on the current rumors, scoops, and controversies within the pop culture world. Hosted exclusively on the Spoilerverse Network, you can find us on any one of your favorite podcatching apps, YouTube, and at Spoilerverse.com. So don't miss out on the excitement. Find us and subscribe now.
Out of all the characters to get their own Disney Plus series, Loki was definitely a given, as he is easily one of the universe's most popular characters. With his dynamic history and a constantly changing allegiance, there is a lot that can be done with this show. So, how does Disney and Marvel pull this off? To me, it seems like the white collar of the MCU. I am Deej Penhollow, and you're listening to the Fandom Vibe. We're taken back to the middle of Avengers Endgame during the time heist, which takes place in the year 2012, while the Loki from that timeline steals the Tesseract and escapes Avengers' custody. His freedom is rather short-lived as a mysterious organization called the Time Variance Authority, or TVA, grabs him and takes him back to their headquarters. It is then revealed that it is the TVA's responsibility to protect the sacred timeline, quote-unquote, as any branches in the time stream could lead to a multiversal conflict. While most of them want to have Loki reset, an agent named Mobius M. Mobius, played by Owen Wilson, takes him aside to see if he can help their agency protect the sacred timeline from future threats. There is a lot riding on this series, as it has a lot of great talent behind it. Tom Hiddleston is back in the iconic role, and the time travel premise has a lot of potential also. I'm a serious sucker for time travel stories, as I have written a comic book myself all about time travel. And it has been confirmed that the series will have the most impact out of all the Marvel shows seen so far, which makes sense, as this is a series that deals with different timelines and could lead to a lot of large events in the future. Knowing all of that going in, there are a few things to take note of to give an idea of the direction the show is going. One major distinction is that Loki here isn't the same Loki we are all familiar with in the main Marvel timeline. Instead, we're following a version of the character who hasn't experienced all of the same things that the original did in the films. This leads to a lot of great moments as we're seeing Loki in his original state of desiring world dominance, which lands perfectly with the environment that he's been placed in that always seems to be one step ahead of him. The humor of this episode stands out, as most of it comes from the situation with Loki being understandably defiant, but being forced to comply as he has not been given many options. He is the god of mischief, and yet he's constantly being sidelined by people in a place that he can't even get a grasp on. What stands out to me in this episode is the chemistry between Loki and Mobius, which leads to a lot of great interactions between the two. The scene plays out like a classic interrogation where one character is trying to understand the other's motive. It also helps that this scene is guided by a clip show that shows us Loki's past history. These clips range from the Battle of New York with the Avengers in 2012 to it being revealed that he was the famous D.B. Cooper during the well-known plane heist in 1971 after losing a bet to Thor. While these scenes are entertaining to watch, I like how this part of the episode allows us to understand why Loki does what he does. Is he motivated by his large ego or heavy insecurities? Does he hurt people because he enjoys it, or because it's something more personal? While fans feel like they have a good understanding of the character from this devious acts in the films, most people never thought to ask what really was driving this character. I've often thought to myself, when big villains from the various realms of pop culture that are hell-bent on universal takeover, like, what happens next? The Dragon Ball series is really good for this, as every villain they come across wants to rule the universe, and I'm like, okay, then what? You have infinite power, and what happens when you get bored? Anyways, I digress. The TVA and their headquarters is an interesting change of pace from the set pieces in the Marvel Universe. The best way to describe it is if you took the agency from Men in Black, with their advanced technology and characters, and combined it with the aesthetic of an office workplace from the 80s, or earlier even. This might sound like an odd on paper type of idea, as it seems like these are two totally different ideas, but when you see how it's portrayed on the show, you see that the way this organization works is akin to an average business place, albeit with a lot of outlandish elements. I love the environments where people do large-scale missions but treat it more like an everyday job. I've heard some people say that the episode is heavy on exposition in certain parts. While I understand this, it didn't bother me because it's an environment that's very inventive with a concept that holds a lot of potential. The idea of tampering with time is relatively new to the Marvel Universe, as it's only been done a few times, so far as Doctor Strange or Avengers Endgame. While it played a major part in both movies, it doesn't do too well as a setup like this, where time is the main focus. The episode was an introduction, so we have to wait and see where it goes, and I'm hopeful that it leads to a multiverse concept, which is something fans are highly anticipating. Especially with all the rumors of Spider-Man No Way Home potentially introducing the Spider-Verse, but that's for another podcast. The world of the TVA stands out as it's made apparent that this place exists on a power plane that we haven't seen before. I personally feel like it may have a connection to the quantum realm from the Ant-Man movies, but maybe not. But to give you an idea, they have a filing cabinet filled with multiple versions of the Infinity Stones that hold no power in this dimension, and are used as common paperweights. I love this idea. It's not only a funny joke, but it also lets the audience know that we're in uncharted territory. The episode eventually resolves itself when Loki returns to the interrogation room to see how his future would have gone had he stayed in the main timeline. The way this scene is portrayed is staggering, as we see Loki visually react to all the events that we've seen in the prior movies. We see him mournfully react to the death of his mother in Thor: The Dark World, his father Odin's death and renewed bond with his brother Thor in Ragnarok, and eventually his own death at the hands of Thanos in Infinity War and Endgame. This episode's series of events eventually causes Loki to realize that his path of cruelty and mischief would have led him nowhere, and he agrees to help Mobius and the TVA. The episode then ends with a surprising revelation that a new threat has emerged in the year 1858 in Oklahoma, and it is none other than a rogue version of Loki himself. While we don't see this version of Loki on the face on screen, we watch as he brutally attacks and burns multiple Minutemen alive before they can fix the timeline. This episode definitely raises a lot of questions. Where did this version of Loki come from? How many people know about the TVA? Will this series lead to a much more built-up multiverse? With so much happening on the screen, it makes sense to have a conflict like this in the series, and it will be as chaotic as the titular character's name itself. I'm excited to see where it goes. Thank you for listening. I've been your host, Deej Penhollow, and this is the Fandom Vibe. It's been a long time since I've been on the mic, and I'm happy to be back at it. Thanks for listening. Hope you come back again.